It was just another Tuesday morning in Crestview Hills, a quiet suburban town known for its tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and the kind of peace that rarely makes the evening news. Families walked their dogs, kids rode their bikes to school, and mailboxes stood like sentinels along well-kept driveways. But behind one of those doors, hidden from the clean-cut lawns and coffee-sipping retirees, something dark was quietly brewing. No one suspected a thing. The man who lived at 142 Pinecrest Lane had always seemed ordinary, if not a little distant. His name was Malcolm Rivers, early 40s, lived alone, drove a gray sedan, never made small talk, never caused trouble. If anything, he was invisible, and that's how he liked it. Malcolm kept to himself, working remotely as a systems analyst. He told people he disliked crowds, preferred email to conversation, and had no family to speak of. Most neighbors shrugged him off as a harmless introvert, but what they didn't know was that Malcolm had been meticulously planning something for years. Something that, if successful, could cause widespread panic. And he believed no one would ever find out. It started small. An alert from a cybersecurity monitoring system flagged an unusual pattern of activity. Someone had been accessing restricted municipal records using a spoofed network signature. Nothing destructive had been done yet, but the footprints were deliberate, calculated, and left behind like a signature waiting to be read. The local IT department handed the case over to the cybercrime division of the Crestview Police Department. It was minor at first, just another case of someone poking around in places they shouldn't be. But when they traced the IP address to Malcolm's home, it caught the attention of Detective Elisa Moran. Elisa had been on the force for over 15 years. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but she also knew that people who commit big crimes often start with small ones. With a warrant in hand, she and her partner paid a quiet visit to Pinecrest Lane. Malcolm answered the door calmly, even smiled. When asked about his internet use, he claimed he was simply testing network vulnerabilities for a freelance contract. He gave vague explanations, technically sound but suspiciously rehearsed. Still, nothing was concrete enough to make an arrest. The team left, but Elisa made a note. "Keep eyes on this one." 2 weeks later, a tip came from a delivery driver. A man matching Malcolm's description had been receiving strange packages with no labels, no return address. Some were heavy, some had foreign writing. Curious, the driver mentioned it to the local post office, which had already logged Malcolm as high volume. A second warrant allowed police to intercept one of the parcels. Inside, they found a series of homemade components, legally ambiguous, but when put together could form a device that triggered alarms across every department. Police returned to Malcolm's home. This time, they weren't asking. They were searching. What they found stunned even the most seasoned officers. In the basement, hidden behind a false wall, was a workstation outfitted with encrypted drives, printed blueprints, surveillance logs, and city schematics. Carefully labeled folders showed patterns of electrical systems, sewer access points, and municipal vulnerabilities. There was no violence, no weapons, but the evidence pointed to a plan designed to create maximum disruption, without a single bullet fired. Malcolm had been building a device meant to shut down the entire city grid. Not to harm, he insisted when questioned. "To prove a point," he said. "To show how fragile the system really is." But no one was buying it. Back at the precinct, Malcolm seemed stunned, not by the arrest, but by the fact that he'd been caught. He hadn't raised his voice. He wasn't defensive. If anything, he looked disappointed, like a magician whose trick had been exposed before the final reveal. Detective Elisa watched him closely as he sat across from her, hands cuffed, face blank. "Why?" she asked quietly. Malcolm finally spoke, his voice even, steady. "I wanted people to wake up. We trust systems we don't understand. One flaw and it all falls apart." "You were willing to scare an entire city to make that point?" Elisa replied. "I never intended to hurt anyone," he said quickly. "Just disrupt." But the line between disruption and terror is thinner than most realize. While Malcolm hadn't physically harmed a soul, the emotional impact of his plan, had it succeeded, would have spread like wildfire. Fear, panic, chaos, hospitals would have lost power, traffic lights would have failed, schools, homes, businesses, all shut down, and the city would have never known who to blame. News of Malcolm's arrest spread quickly. The story made headlines across the region. Quiet tech worker plotted major city disruption, one paper wrote. Others called him a digital saboteur, a loner genius turned threat. But perhaps the most haunting part of the story was that he never thought he'd get caught. He believed his plan was flawless, that his purpose was greater than the panic it might cause. In court, Malcolm pleaded not guilty. His lawyer argued he never activated anything, that all his devices were inactive prototypes, but prosecutors had the files, the plans, the timestamps. The jury saw intention, not action, but ambition, with full knowledge of its consequences. He was convicted on multiple charges related to cybercrime, conspiracy to commit public disruption, and unlawful possession of restricted digital material. He was sentenced to several years in a federal facility specializing in cyber offenders. As he was escorted out of the courtroom, Malcolm looked back only once, toward the spectators, the press, the flashing lights. Some say he smirked. Others say he looked heartbroken. But Detective Elisa believed he finally realized something, that no matter how perfect the plan, the human element, the small slip, the curious neighbor, the unseen watcher, was always stronger, and in the end, that's what stopped him.